Good evening, everyone. In this episode, I wanted to talk about premonitions. And for for those who don't know what a premonition is, it's basically the phenomenon of where people experience some kind of physical and a brief, or sometimes a little bit longer than brief, but usually just a brief. They receive information from the future um, through their mind or other senses. Um, they could be uh, it could be information from the near future, can be information from the distant future. You may receive visual information, you may receive audio information, or both. It could be a sudden wave of nausea. It could be a sudden wave of dizziness. It can take many forms. Even I, you might even be able to make a case that uh, deja vu is a form um, of premonitions, but there's that's kind of a gray area because you don't really remember the information until you're the moment happens. So it's like you can't act on it, but like you recognize that you've seen it before. You get this intense feeling that you've been there, you've done something, you've been a place, whatever the circumstances are that you have this sudden intense feeling of familiarity, and then it's gone. But anyway, I would make an argument that it's technically falls under the same category, but I could also understand why someone would argue against it. Anyway, that's what I want to talk about on this episode. I've been binging a lot of unsolved mysteries and sightings, old shows from 90s, 80s, and 90s that talked about all kinds of stuff related to well, I mean, unsolved mysteries was about mostly uh, violent crimes, but mixed in with peppered in with some episodes about um, UFO sightings and alien abductions and Bigfoot and stuff like that. Sightings is purely just all the paranormal. It's all it is. And that show, when I was a kid, that was my absolute favorite show. I love that show. Anyway, so we're gonna dive into premonitions, into the topic of premonitions, and I'm going to share with you a an example that I'd like to use, considering there are many examples of many people throughout human history who have claimed to have experienced premonitions. I mean, anyone from like Julius Caesar to Abraham Lincoln, all kinds of politicians and celebrities have claimed to have seen something that, whether it's their own death or whether it's someone else's death. Um, they've been recorded throughout human history. Now, um, the one I want to the particular person there's one account that I want to go with, and I'll tell you why in a second. But it's um it's an account that was actually the the, f- the funny thing is, this account was not recorded by the person who had it. It was recorded by the person she told, and they wrote it down. If they hadn't written it down, or she had not told them, no one would probably have ever known. And it's written so it was noted in such a way where it seemed like it wasn't really that big of a deal. Like it was just like, oh yeah, I just had a weird dream. Okay, but anyway, we'll get to that in a second. We'll get to the details in a second. I just wanted to note that there was a woman named um, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was very dear friends with a woman named Susan B. Anthony, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. They were both um, very staunch supporters of, um, and they were very much involved in many social causes and many social movements, such as temperance movement, abolition of slavery, and finally women's suffrage. I believe the two had met in 1851 at an event. One of their it was I think it was um, I don't remember what particular cause they were working on at the time, but they met at an event, and according to my understanding, they became like instant friends, and they were very, very dear friends for over 50 years, like for the rest of their lives, basically. And so um, there was Elizabeth Cady Stanton kept a personal diary. And she probably kept more than one diary. I don't know, but I'm not exactly sure. But she definitely had a personal diary, and a personal diary is actually a matter of public record now. You can find it on the internet for free, and you can read through it for free. You can even go find it in the Library of Congress. It was it's that it's that prestigious, it's that important. It's been documented in the Library of Congress. I think the actual diary itself is somewhere in there. Anyway, so she kept a personal diary, and she was very diligent about writing in it. And one day there was this one entry um, that was in her diary. And by the way, the reason I found this out, the reason I even know about her diary and the diary entry that involves Susan B. Anthony having a premonition was from a book that I just read not that or reread not that while ago. It's an old book from the late either late 80s or early 90s called um, it's part of a series called Strange Unsolved Mysteries. There's a series of like I think like 10 books, maybe 9, 10, or 11 books. I have all except one of them. They're short reads. They're each chapter is like a page to, half a page to like 2 pages long. But they're really fun to read, especially for kids, young people. They're really fun to read, and they're very interesting. So in the book in the edition called Mysteries of the Mind and the Senses, and I'll put a picture up so you can see it and maybe look it up yourself. There was a chapter about Susan B. Anthony in this book. They don't tell you right away that's who they're describing. They describe the event, and at the very end of the event, they they reveal that what they just described was a dream that someone just had, and they reveal who had the dream, and and that's that, and the chapter ends. That's kind of like the way they built the suspense. But I thought that was I thought that was really fascinating. I thought the way they did it was very clever and was very fascinating. It made it really enjoyable to read. And then I decided to look up where this person got that information from because I'd never. I mean, I'm not some historian, I'm not some expert on the life of Susan B. Anthony, but um, I really enjoyed the account uh, that that this person described because um, it was the exact kind of premonition that I was looking for. It was exactly the kind that really makes my it really excites my imagination because it opens up if it's true, which I believe it is, it opens up a lot of possibilities and it really challenges conventional thinking, conventional wisdom, conventional science and logic. So I looked up the author's source information, and it turns out the author got the author found he got it from a book written by Walter Franklin Prince called Noted Witnesses for Psychic Occurrences. This is an even older book. I think this is like from like the 60s or the 70s. And um, the first, on the cover, I'll show you I'll include a picture of it so you can see it for yourself. And you'll notice that in the cover photo, the first name is Susan B. Anthony. And uh, what he did was he went in and read through uh, Elizabeth Elizabeth Cady Stanton's um, diary and found this entry that we're about to go into, um, and that um, and that inspired him to write that chapter on her alleged premonition experience. So, and I'll put it up on the screen, and we can. I'll read it out loud, but I'll put up the screen just so you guys can see it too. read it for yourself and see word for word what it actually says. But or you can, again, you can find that book and read through it, and maybe read through some of the um, other psychic occurrences that this person documented. So so that's where they got that's where this person, so the author got it from this book by Walter Franklin, and Walter Franklin got it from directly from the diary of turns out she had he had actually gotten it from the actual diary of Elizabeth Katie Stanton, which again also brings more credibility to the case, because they were very close friends. And that kind of, that's also that's also something else I wanted to mention. I wanted to mention that another reason why I chose this example um, was not just because of what the accounting of the case, but because of the credibility of the person. We're talking about someone who um, was not interested at all in psychic phenomenon or paranormal activity. All she wanted to do her whole life was just to help people, and that's all she did do. She does help people. From all her social movements to she would she would put her support behind politicians who aligned with her values. And she was very obviously she was very brave and very smart, because she was able to accomplish a lot. She was able to organize and get people um, to show up at events, and really, you know you could probably make the argument that between her and Elizabeth Stanton, that they were arguably one of the most, if not the most, notable and important women of the 20 of the of modern history, considering what they did. What they were what they were able to accomplish within their lifetimes. So it's and those the consequences of those accomplishments have rippled for millions and millions and millions of people's lives um, since then. So, um, and again, like this person, or so, like I said, this person's credibility is, I judge it to be very good. She's a person. Both people are someone of impeccable character. They're honest. Um, they're If they weren't honest, then they probably wouldn't have been successful. They wouldn't have had probably a big following. If people felt like they were dishonest, they probably wouldn't have been very popular. So, I think they were very honest, and I think they were visionaries. They saw a better in their minds. They saw the way the world could be, instead of the way they wanted to make it. They wanted to improve. They wanted to make a difference, a big difference before they left. They wanted to leave the world a better place than they found it when they were born. So, and then also both of them were completely sober. They were both against the consumption of alcohol and the sale of it. So obviously they weren't uh, big drinkers. They weren't big partiers. And there's also, and I even looked into this just to be absolutely sure. I wanted to be absolutely 100% sure this was the case. Neither one of them were taking any kind of medications. There's no records of them taking any kind of medications that could be like mind altering. Like, I mean, I don't know exactly what medicine was available back then, but I'm pretty sure opiates were, are it's considered a drug that can alter it affects the brain directly, and um, it can affect your brain in many different ways. I don't know if it can induce hallucinations, but I know it can severely affect. I know it severely affects the brain. Anyway, neither one of them were taking any kind of mind altering medication I'm aware of, and they certainly didn't indulge in psychotropic substances, because again, that went straight. That was in direct conflict with their beliefs and their values. They were believed in sobriety, and they believed in temperance and freedom. For all people to be free. And so, and that's all they were interested in. That's it. They weren't interested in ghost stories. They weren't interested in anything even remotely close to that. So, given all that information, or give that all being said, I take I accept both of these. Elizabeth Stanton, who again was the one who wrote the diary entry, and Susan B. Anthony, um, who relayed the information that Elizabeth Stanton wrote in her diary. So, there's a couple more facts I wanted to mention just before we get into the diary entry. Um, One, this is the only diary entry from Elizabeth Stanton regarding Anthony um, and her alleged premonition. She didn't call it that, but I'm going to call it that. Um, there is no other diary entries mentioned that have anything to do with dreams or strange dreams or just, sleep disturbances. There are no other that I could find. Um, there's no there's no records of Susan B. Anthony ever personally discussing strange dreams or dream disturbances publicly or privately. At least none that I can find. And then um, um, there's no evidence suggesting. Uh, well, we already went over their medical and um, substance histories. Yeah, because we already know that they were there's no records that they were on any kind of medications, and then there weren't any mind altering medications, or they didn't use any. They weren't abusing any substances like again opiates, marijuana, or they didn't even smoke cigarettes. So yeah. So there's no. This is like this was a one time only um, uh, diary entry that was never repeated in hers or anyone hers, Anthony's, or anyone that knew her. This was the one time and one time only. That doesn't mean it only happened once. It just means it was only written down once. I would be willing to bet she had it that happened more than once, but for now we're just going to assume that this was the only time since it was the only time it was mentioned. But again, I just want to stress this. Even Susan B. Anthony, she didn't ever tell you. She didn't talk about it. There's no records of her ever mentioning it publicly or privately to anybody, anyone. She didn't want to. Again, she wasn't. She just want. She did. She didn't want to. Um, she didn't want to draw attention. I would imagine she didn't tell people because she didn't want to draw attention away from the mission. It was just her, which is what her full attention was focused on. It was the mission and it was her social causes. She had no interest in pursuing psychic phenomena. So anyway, so I don't believe that. I believe this her account is credible, um, and so now we'll go ahead and get into the diary entry. So I'm going to put this up again. I'm going to put this on the screen. You can read it along with me, or you can just listen to my voice, whichever you want to do. So the diary entry, which was written by again Elizabeth's Katie Stanton, and it says, "In a few days, we are expecting Miss Anthony to make us a visit. She has had a very remarkable dream. The physician ordered her from Philadelphia to Atlantic City for her health. While in the latter place, she had a very vivid dream one night. She thought she was being burned alive in one of the hotels, and when she arose in the morning, told her niece what she had dreamt. We must pack at once and go back to Philadelphia, she said. This was done, and the next day, the hotel in which they had been, 10 other hotels, and miles of boardwalk were destroyed by fire." Okay, so um, so for starters, the her trip to Atlantic City, um, there's no, I'm not able to find any records her uh, about her visiting a doctor and them recommending her going on vacation. Um, but I'm inferring from this diary entry that she uh, sh- she had seen a doctor for some reason. If I had to guess, it was probably stress or um, something related to stress, something like a symptom of stress of some kind, or maybe multiple symptoms. And so the doctor's ultimate recommendation was, like you're not your health is fine. You just work too much and you're on edge all the time. You stretch yourself out a lot. You should just take a weekend and just relax, and then come back at it with go somewhere beautiful. Get some fresh air. Just kick back and like people do all the time. People stressed out at work, and they take a week off and go somewhere fun and beautiful. Not uncommon at all. Very, very, very common. So, so so she went to the doctor. The doctor prescribed and recommended that she take a weekend off. So she decided to. I don't know why she chose Atlantic City, but she, whatever, for whatever reason, she did. Maybe someone recommended to her. Don't know, but she decided to go there, and she brought her niece with her. And when they got there, she, I, it was, I think from the diary entry, sounds like they were in Atlantic City. Like, I don't know if they were staying in multiple like different hotels, but it sounds like I infer from the um from the diary entry that it was like the day it was like they had been there for they got to Atlantic City, and then they stayed there one day and then left. So they made the trip, and then they got to the hotel. They or one she says one of the hotels anyway. Um, she got to a hotel, um, went to bed, woke up the next day. Or I'm sorry, got to a hotel, went to sleep, and uh, had this intense, vivid dream that I'm calling I'm alleging as a premonition, because I believe that's what it was. She's just referring to it as a very vivid dream because she was able to, because from her point, from her description, it was when someone says very vivid, that means it was very realistic, and they were able to remember every detail. You know, and the room looked exactly like her hotel room, and she saw herself burning alive in it. And she obviously the dream must have been it's not just like a dream where you just think, oh well, yeah, it was just a silly dream. I'm just I'm just gonna go back to sleep and then just forget about it. Obviously, whatever she experienced was so intense. Now remember, she's not into this stuff. She's not into psychic phenomena. She couldn't care less about this stuff. She just all she wanted to do was just help people. And so, but this dream that she had was so intense. It was so intense that it um I wa- I almost want to say inspire, but I feel like that's not the right word. It was like it it provoked her to act on it, to act on it. That she believed what she saw was a glimpse of the future. Now, again, it doesn't say that in the diary, but I believe that she believed that what she saw was like some kind of a warning. It was like a vision of what's about to happen. Now, we'll come back to the implications of that in a second, but anyway, so she has this crazy dream that's um, extremely vivid. It's very real, and decides, tells her niece, you know what, we gotta get out of here. Something bad's gonna happen. We have to get out of here. So they pack up and leave immediately. It wasn't like they just stayed for another day or two and then left. That very morning that she woke up after having that vivid dream, she's like, "We're out of here." Now, just think about how intense that dream. How intense would a dream have to be to make you, you go to all the trouble to, um, you go to all the trouble to make plans for a vacation. You travel, you do all your packing, and then you make arrangements for transportation. And then and this is, remember, this is the 19th century. So it took even longer to get places. And it was a lot more difficult to get around, like long distance. You travel all that way, and you're looking forward to a nice relaxed weekend. And then you have a dream, and then you're so scared and you're so frightened that you pack your bags immediately right after you got there, and she went right back to Philadelphia, right back home. So, and I don't doubt that when she got back, she probably told her more. She probably described it to her. She probably told her more details about it, and why you know, why it was so frightening, but and why it made her want to leave. But anyway, so she leaves right away. They pack up and they leave immediately. They're gone, right? And then less than a day, and then that same night, sometime that same night, um, not only does the hotel that she was staying in burn to the ground, but 10 other buildings and miles of boardwalk burn to the ground, exactly like she described in her so-called in her alleged premonition or vivid dream, so-called vivid dream. Exactly. I mean, what are the odds of that? You have a dream, you have a crazy dream like that, and then the next night, it actually happens. But here's the kicker, though. Here's the problem, though. Is what she saw, though, when she saw her premonition, she was in it. She was part of that premonition. I mean, yeah, she perished. She was there and she perished. But having had now that she gained access to that information about what was about to happen, she acted on it and changed it. So which again, like I said, it provokes all kinds of interesting questions. And in my view, it really comes down to two. But again, it can provoke all kinds of more than two questions. I mean, I'm sure lots of people out there can think of all kinds of questions to ask about a situation like that. But in my mind, it really boils down to two things. One, if she indeed had a premonition, which I believe she did, if she actually saw a vision, if she caught a glimpse of the short term, of the near term future, her future specifically, and what was about to happen, how was she able to do this? What's the mechanism? What happened? What made it possible? Was it something internal? Was it something external? Maybe both, maybe neither. Um, my first question is, what was the mechanism? And then the second question is, since she gained that knowledge about what was about to happen and was able to change it, what happened? What does that mean about the premonition then? Again, if the premonition was not just something that her mind fabricated, if it was an actual vision from the future, which I believe it was, and in that vision, she saw herself burned to death. Then what happened? How was she able to? And then she changed it, where she left and wasn't in the hotel, and she didn't burn alive. Then how was she able? It's almost like a reverse. It's almost like a reverse uh, paradox. Grandfather. It's like the grandfather paradox, the classic grandfather paradox in reverse. Uh, where in the grandfather paradox, it's basically a nutshell. Uh, this guy goes back in time. He to when his grandfather was a young man, and before he met his his wife, he kills his grandfather, and then prevents them from meeting him and his mother and his grandmother. I'm sorry. Well, sorry. Let me start over here. So a time traveler goes back in time and kills his grandfather before he meets your grandma. Therefore, his parents, his or her parents are never born, and thus the time traveler is never born. But the paradox is, well, if you eliminated your predecessors, then how were if you eliminated your family tree in the past, then how were you able to exist to be able to go back in time to do this such a thing? Wouldn't you not exist too? That's a paradox. How can you um how can you go back in time and kill someone when the action you created never prevented you from even existing at all? In Susan B. Anthony's case, it's kind of the reverse of that, where she didn't travel to the future, but her mind like somehow peered into the future, the very near term future, and showed her what was about to happen. And again, why? And I guess the third question you could say is, why that specific? I mean, why that specific situation? Why not? When she was at a casino, she I'm pretty sure she doesn't gamble, but let's just pretend that she did. Why not have a premonition about, when she's at when she's at a card table, and it can warn her not to make a big bet, when at a certain point in the game, or a premonition of her lying on the beach and just like something pleasant. Instead, it almost always involves something horrific. It's always, these premonitions are almost always uh, intertwined with events of tragedy or death or violence, or all of it. But anyway, the first two questions, the primary two questions that we're going to try and answer here is, again, one, if she did actually see a brief vision of her future, what was about to happen. How was she able to do that? And what was the mechanism? What was the process? What made that possible? And then the second question is, if she did, since if it was a premonition and she saw it and then acted on it and changed it, what does that mean about that? What does that mean for the vision that she saw? I mean, how could she have witnessed a vision that didn't end up happening? I mean, it mostly did, but remember, she died in that premonition. What in the event she saw, she died. So she changed it, and so how could she have witnessed herself? How could she have witnessed herself dying if she never in a fire? If she didn't end up if that didn't end up happening, how could she have witnessed it? So those are the two questions that we're going to explore and see if we can figure out if there's any good answers out there. Now, for for the first question, let's let's start with the let's start with so let's start with the premonition itself, and the basic concept of it, which is the ability to see future events, right? And the first question that raises that you would be presented with in that situation would be, um, if if premonitions are real, then that means the future has already happened. And according to, again, conventional thinking, conventional science, and logic, I don't believe that's true. Um, and I believe conventional thinking, conventional wisdom would tell you that's not true. That the future um, isn't written until it arrives at the present moment and unfolds in whatever way it ends up unfolding, and then it quickly goes into the past. So um, so obviously, conventional thinking and wisdom isn't going to help us there. So if we ask biology, like how could this have happened? How could this have been possible? Biology will basically tell you there's nothing in the human brain that could account for this kind of phenomenon. There's nothing going on, and there's there are areas of the brain that we don't fully understand yet, but at least not publicly. But there's no direct evidence to link that kind of um, that kind of ability to any specific part of the brain. And more than likely, biology is going to say, therefore, whatever she experienced, it must have just been, you know, just a really crazy coincidence. Which, I mean, for me, it's a major eye roll right there. It's like, you can't be serious. You can't possibly be serious. I mean, what are the odds of that? Like, what I really wonder what the odds of that are. Like you have it the night before your hotel burns down. You have a nightmare about seeing yourself burning alive in a hotel room, looks just like the one you're staying in, and then the next day it happens. Do you have any idea what the odds of that are, of it being just a random coincidence? um, I would bet you'd have a better chance of being struck by lightning than something like that happening. So I don't accept that explanation at all. That's just, again, that's just silly. There's no way it was coincidence. It wasn't, luck. It wasn't women's intuition. It wasn't anything like that. Women are the only ones who have premonition, so it's nothing like that. Um, so if we ask, if we look to, say, Einstein, and we look to his theories on relativity and special relativity, um, Einstein would say, sure, you can theoretically, theory relativity and special relativities say that you could technically travel into the future if you have a spaceship that can travel really fast, and by really fast I mean like significantly close to the speed of light, or you just orbit something like you go out in space and you orbit a black hole a couple of times, and then you break orbit and come back to Earth, and you'll be in the future. Um, we know that gravity and we know that matter and energy distort space and time, and we know that speed also distorts time. So now I'm going to go on a limb here and say I'm pretty sure she didn't have an advanced spaceship capable of doing any of those things. And even if she did, how would she get back? Because again, unless I'm mistaken, neither relativity nor special relativity allows for um, the possibility of traveling back in time. Although you can, you can argue that Stephen Hawking, in his the Einstein-Rosen bridge theory, wormhole basically. Um, but again, I'm pretty sure she didn't have access to a wormhole either. Led her um, that led her from um, that led her. I'm pretty sure she didn't go, a few hour or a day into the future with uh, a day into the future with her advanced spaceship, and then somehow create a wormhole that led her back to the moment before, the night before. I just, yeah, it's all silliness. It's all silliness. None of that's possible. She didn't, because she didn't have access to any of that, and so we're not going to find any. My point is, given what science and physics tells us, it tells us that it can't explain it for us. It can't explain her experience. There's nothing in it. There's nothing there that can offer any hope of an explanation. So then, where does that leave us? Well, that leaves us um, where some are brave enough to venture to go and open-minded to go, which is looking more into the extraordinary. Starting to turn to the fantastic and the extraordinary. Looking into the possibility of just basically expanding your minds and being open to new possibilities, new realities. You know, just being open to theories that are not exactly mainstream, and they're considered fringe, and they're only called that by people who can't explain them, can't account for these things. But so again, if we look to if we so if we reject what conventional thinking offers, which is not much, and even the little it does, it's not it probably wouldn't it's conventional thinking is not only unable to explain this scenario, it will likely end up trying to debunk it because of that, because it threatens, you know the the structure of the history of conventional thinking. Just you know people who just think that way, who think that, well, everything's um, everything's black and white, and yeah, it's just we figured everything out. Everything's black and white. There's nothing new to learn or be explored here. That's obviously not going to get us anywhere because these are extraordinary circumstances, and that requires for extraordinary new ideas. So, where else can we turn to? Well, first of all, is she start? So again, going back to her premonition, or her alleged premonition. Sorry, that's what I'm calling it. If she truthfully saw, she truly had a real bona fide premonition and was able to see into the future, like or catch a glimpse of it, then it would, by definition, um, prove that the future or a future already happens. It's as real as what you're experiencing right now. That the past, present, and future are all happening simultaneously, and they're all equally real. There's no the fact that we experience it, um, that we see it the way it is, which is just like one moment at a time, is a limitation of our perception. And it's not the way that time really works is different. We just we lack the perspective to see it for what it really is and how it really works. Our view of it is, again, just highly subjective and not rooted in reality at all. Um, and I started looking up. I started searching around if there were any. I don't know how I missed this years ago. I don't know how the hell I could have missed this, but it turns out there is a fairly popular theory that's accepted by a lot of credible physicists and astrophysicists and cosmologists. It's called black universe theory, which is also known as eternalism. And black universe theory is a model of time rooted in physics and philosophy that proposes all moments in time, past, present, and future, coexist as a single unchanging four-dimensional structure. So again, like I said, it proposes that every moment that happens, every moment that does happen and is happening and as ever will ever happen, they all occur simultaneously. They're all equally real. It's our limited perception that only allows us to see one moment at a time. But in fact, all of these, so like again, going back to when you were born, um, the first time the first car you drove or the first car you bought, your first kiss, the birth of your first child, your first job, all those like moments and everything in between, they're all still happening right now as you listen to my voice. They're all still happening. They're also happening out there somewhere in the block, in this giant block structure that's described in the four-dimensional block, which some people call a tesseract, also known as a hypercube. Hypercube is a four-dimensional cube. um, that all these events are just, it's not a matter of when, it's really a matter of, it's more about where. And that the hypercube is just where time exists, is more spatial than anything else. It's just, you move in this direction and now you're going back to 1930s. You move in this direction and now you're going back to, you're going ahead to 2005. It's really just a matter of where you are in the block that determines what time period it is and what you're witnessing. Unless you're like us and you only experience one slice of it at a time, and so the illusion of time flowing like a river, future, present, past in that exact sequence. It seems to work that way from our limited perspective, but in reality, it's an illusion. So I want to read a couple core concepts of black universe theory just to shed some more detail on it. Black universe theory, it envisions a reality as a four-dimensional block that includes the three spatial dimensions, length, width, and height, and time as the fourth dimension. In this model, all events in the universe, from the Big Bang to the distant future, are all equally real and exist simultaneously within this block. The distinction between past, present, and future is an illusion created by our subjective experience and not a fundamental property of reality. Our perception of time flowing is likened to moving through the static block, with our consciousness experiencing one slice of the block at a time. The theory draws heavily from Einstein's theory of special relativity, which demonstrated that time is not absolute. The relativity of simultaneity shows that different observers moving relative to each other may disagree on the timing and order of events, suggesting that now is not universal. In general relativity, space time is described as a four dimensional manifold, where events are points in this continuum. The Black universe interprets this manifold as a fixed structure where all points or events are equally real, regardless of when they occur. The famous Minkowski space diagram, sorry, the famous Minkowski space-time diagram, developed by Hermann Minkowski, which was Einstein's teacher, formalized this idea by representing space-time as a single geometric entity. The key implication, let me just read off the key implications of this theory, and then we'll go back and review some of it. The key implications of this theory are: A, no objective now. There is no universal present moment. What one observer perceives as now might be the past or future for another, depending on their relative motion or position in a gravitational field. Determinism. Since all events in the Black universe are fixed, the future is as set as the past. This raises questions about free will, as every choice and outcome already exists in the Black. Illusion of change. The sensation of time passing is a product of human consciousness, possibly due to how our brains process information or thermodynamic processes like increasing entropy. So let's go back and review some of these points. So again, in this Black universe theory, um, time events in time are more like destinations. Like when you look at a map and you see New York is over, like if I'm in Chicago, and I see, okay, New York is uh, east southeast, uh, whatever, 800 miles or whatever it is, um, and so you would move in that direction for that distance, and eventually you would arrive at that point, right? You would be in you would be with somewhere in New York, right? Um, and and if you wanted to go, um, let's say let's say you wanted to go back and let's say you're middle aged and you want to go back and watch uh, see your first birth, kind of go back and watch your first birthday, as if you had it on tape and you were gonna watch it on tape. So you would, just like our example with the map and going in, how to get to New York from Chicago. You would just, kind of, you would observe the block, and then you would just say, okay, so if I want to see myself celebrating my first birthday, then I have to go this direction I'd have to go this direction at this for this amount of time, or this amount of distance, and then you'll land right where you want to be. Um, and along the way, again, you're going to see all these events just happening, um, all at the same time. And for us it looks like a sequence of events. In reality, it's just in reality it could be just a bunch of slices. So one way to look at this is not the best analogy, but it helps me sometimes. It's like when you're watching a movie, like when people used to watch movies at the movie theater with they actually had like 8 millimeter film, where you open up the tin and there's a big roll of film in there, right? And when you look at the film under a light, you just see a bunch of frames, right? You see a bunch of still frames, and then when you watch the frames, rapid succession, you begin to see motion. The characters come alive, right? But unless you look at it in that way, all you see is one slice at a time. You don't know that what you're looking at is just a rapid series of still images. right? You don't know that unless you have that perspective. Well, it's kind of like we're experiencing life watching the movie. Like we're all just sitting and watching that 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 movie. We're all in a movie theater watching a screen and watching the actors move and talk and watching action sequences, thinking like that's what you're looking at is how time really works. But the truth is that what you're seeing is just a collection of a whole bunch of still frame images, and you can go back and look at some from earlier in the movie, and you can go forward. You can just skip ahead or go back to any frame you want and rewatch it again and again as much as you want. It's sort of like I kind of liken it to that. Again, it's not the most accurate and most pointed analogy, but in my mind, it helps me that this four-dimensional cube of time is, again, it's like that ream of a film where it's you when you have that perspective, you realize that it's just a bunch of moments that all are occurring at the same time. But from a human being's point of view, whether it's our consciousness or whatever, it only allows you to see it um, in rapid succession. You're restricted to only seeing witnessing the events of time in this universe in rapid succession. We're unable to see it um, at the we're unable to take the film the film off the projector and look at it frame by frame and go back and rewind it. Right? We're all just sitting in our seats watching, and then when the movie's over, it's over, and you leave. So anyway, so it's um, this theory um, begins to explain. It begins to possibly explain um, how Susan B. Anthony was able to perceive the future. I'm sorry, why she was able. Sorry, not how. Why she was able to perceive a moment in the future. Her that her alleged premonition was a glimpse into the future. If we assume that's true, then this theory um, does a really great job of mostly explaining why why it was possible. The one thing though, the one little detail that we went through that unfortunately doesn't fully explain the why is the determinism part, which is, if I go back and read it, it's since all events in the block universe are fixed, the future is as set as the past. This raises questions about free will, as every choice and outcome already exist in the block. See, that's where I have a problem, because if, again, going back to Susan B. Anthony's alleged premonition, if she really did see a glimpse into her near future, which I believe she did, um, she then technically, according to this Black universe theory, she should have died in that. Her and her niece should have died in that hotel fire. I'm very glad they didn't. But um, but that's what she saw. And according to Black universe theory, every moment is fixed, and it you know it you can't. There's no changing it. Like it questions free will. It challenges whether free will actually exists or not. Like, or, if you're just following a predetermined line of events that's already occurred, then then I guess then none of then the idea of free will is just an illusion. It's you're not really freely making decisions. They were already done. It just looks like you are, but you already the truth might be that you already did. So, but again, in Susan B. Anthony's case, she got a glimpse and then she kind of cheated, which is kind of like cheating. And then she changed it, which shouldn't be possible in a Black universe theory. It contradicts, one of the key implications, the core concepts, which is, all events are fixed and they all happen at the same they all happen simultaneously. And that there's no now there's no true now for anyone. That then the concept of now is different everywhere in the universe for everyone, for all observers everywhere in the universe. But if the fact that she was able to duck that future that she saw, um, unfortunately, puts a big glaring hole in that theory. I still think that it's part of the explanation, but it's not where the explanation ends. I think it's where it starts, but it's not where it ends. So let's focus on that for a moment. Yeah, she was able to use the information that she received to change the outcome of the future, which she did successfully and thankfully. So if that's true, then how would that be possible? Because in a black universe theory, it's not possible. So how could how could how could this happen? By the way, um, in the movie, if you're looking for, it's just popped in my head just now. If you're looking for some recent cinematic examples of how that might look, um, again, a black universe theory in practice might look. The movie Interstellar. I don't know if the directors or writers or whoever um, came up with some of these scenes, but they actually made a really good case for Black Universe theory. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but they pretty much did because if you remember, I'm just going to share this real quick, and maybe I'll put that scene up so you guys, for those who have never seen it, if you've never seen it, just don't remember. There's two particular scenes where it very well illustrates Black Universe theory. One is when he plunges into that supermassive black hole. He doesn't get torn apart because of the fact that the black hole is so enormous, the tidal effects don't rip him to shreds. So he plunges in, then he ejects out of his ship, and then he falls into the singularity. The singularity ended up being a three-dimensional representation of a four-dimensional um, hypercube, a three-dimensional representation of a tesseract, basically. I mean, it's spherical in shape, but it's basically supposed to be um, it's a three-dimensional representation of what the black universe theory is proposing, and I think they did a great job of. It's kind of eerie the way they did the way they shot it, but it's kind of creepy, but accurate nonetheless. So Cooper is there. He's just hovering around, flying through from from one moment to the next, and they're all again. He looks around, he looks up, and he looks down, and he sees all above him, below him, to the left of him, to the right of him, all these different events happening all at the same time, and they just repeat. They just keep repeating, and they just happen over and over and over again. And um, it's the moment he's at is back at his house where his family is, or his daughter specifically, but where his family lives, and he's he can see on the side. He's looking through the on the other side through the bookshelf, and he's trying to call to her, but obviously she can't hear her. There's no way she can hear him, and he starts banging on the side that's on the whatever it is, right up that's the bookshelves are like right up against the wall, but it's not obviously um the wall he's hitting is obviously not sheetrock, it's something else. And he hits it hard enough that he's able to make some of the books fall. And she thinks it's a ghost, but when in fact it's really um her dad uh at a future time. But keep in mind that for him, he's experiencing his now moment at the same time she's experiencing her now moment as a little kid. And her dad even walks in the room and, before he leaves, and he's talking to her, and he's trying to, trying to calm her down and, you know, trying to smooth things over before he leaves. He's reaching out to her while he's in the future experiencing his now moment, and they're in from the future Cooper's point of view. It's the past, but from the Cooper in the past, it's the now moment. So they're both experiencing their now moment, now quote unquote now present moments and they're both happening at the same time, and they're even in a very limited way, they're even interacting with each other, which again, I think is a really great way to, in a fun and imaginative way to illustrate block universe theory. And then, um, he was able to use gravity to, they say that in the movie that gravity is like the only thing that they know of that can cross through dimensions that spans, it's able to transcend all the different dimensions, and he uses that to somehow transmit extremely complex quantum mechanics information, which through like binary or something like that, or Morse code or something, but whatever. And then the other scene was when the tesseract begins to collapse. You just see it in the distance, uh, like folding in on itself, and it just gets brighter and brighter and brighter, and all of a sudden it just goes all white. And he says, "What happens now?" And then you see him flying back through the wormhole, and but everything's like all the coloring is like from his point of view, it's all inverted. It's all like black and white, and it's just all like sparkly and crazy. But anyway, he's going back through the wormhole, but he passes by um, the crew, himself and Dr. Brand and the two others that were with him. Um, and he interacts with Dr. Brand. Again, it's his now moment. It's his present moment, but it's also her present moment happening at the same time. From his point of view, it's the past, but from her point of view, well, she thinks it's like an alien, but from her point of view, it's the future. But both of them are experiencing a moment that's for them is the present now moment, and they even like shake hands. They even touch. He reaches out and shakes her hand, and you know, they you had two completely different moments in time interacting with each other somehow. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting a little lost in this. I just thought those were really cool ways really really imaginative and really cool ways um, to help someone visualize um, Black universe theory. But anyway, so let's go back to the problem we ran into. So the problem we run into is if Black universe theory is true and all moments in time exist simultaneously, they're all equally real. And Susan B. Anthony was able to glimpse the future of this because of Black universe theory, because it already happened. It explains it up until the point to when she decides to change it. Then it becomes a problem because it's like, well, Black universe theory doesn't it it technically allows for time travel, but it doesn't do well with paradoxes. They um the so the block universe follow the while the block universe allows for theoretical possibility of time travel, as all moments are equally real. However, paradoxes like the grandfather paradox complicate the idea, because it's like, wait a minute. So if you change something um, along the way, then how can those future events already be set if you significantly change them, in before they happen? So it challenges. Yeah, it doesn't do well with paradoxes. Let's just put it that way. It does not handle paradoxes very well. um so where do we go from here? Okay, well, there's another it got me thinking about when I started thinking about that. I started thinking, well, um maybe this has something to do with parallel universes or multiverses, because that's something I've been interested in for since I was a kid, like way before it became like mainstream in film. I mean, it wasn't until like I think like maybe the mid '90s or so that there were filmmakers who actually were starting to introduce their audience to the possibility of parallel universes and multiverses. Like that movie, The One, with Jet Li. Um, I'm not going to go through it, but the synopsis of the movie, but you can go watch it or look it up yourself. But basically, that was the first movie I'd ever seen, like mainstream movie that. And I'm not saying it was the first one. I'm just saying that was the first one I remember where they actually well, whereas where time travel was sort of like an element of the movie. It wasn't the focus of the movie, but it was part of the movie. And but in this one, it was more about the fact that there are parallel universes, and he had to go around. One of the copies of Jet Li's character was going around killing other copies of himself in other parallel universes. And that was making him stronger and strong. He would absorb like their energy or life force or something. It would make him stronger and stronger, more powerful. So, um, yeah, because up until that point, movies like all the time travel movies where they followed this, the rigid time travel code, which is, um, what will be, what is, and what was. Like obviously, Back to the Future is the most classic example. In that movie, there's only one true universe. There's only one true timeline, and there can't be any others. You can change it. You can change it along the way, but and with the time machine, you can go back and change it, but it changes the one timeline, though, right? Just the one. Um, and Doc Brown illustrates this on a chalkboard in Back to the Future 2 when Marty goes to that gravesite and finds his father's grave. He takes him back and explains why the 1985 they returned to was so different from the one they remember. And he says because, and he shows him that newspaper with a picture of the sports almanac in his back pocket. And he realizes that he used that the old Biff in the future went back into his and visited his younger self, Biff, and gave him the sports almanac so he could cheat and become the wealthiest person in the world. Um, and so again, so he explains it visually by just drawing a line saying, here's the past, here's the future, and here's 1985. Well, when we went to the future in 2015, he went back in time to 1955, changed it, and so when we returned and then brought the time machine back before we noticed, and then so when we went back to 1985, he created an alternate 1985. He drew like a parallel line to it, but then he crossed out the original timeline that they were on. Because again, in conventional thinking, it's like there's just the one true universe. There's the one true timeline and nothing else. Now, and so you know, um, and thankfully Marty is able to restore his timeline and actually improve it by the end of both movies. By the end of all movies, but anyway, um, it wasn't until like middle late '90s when they started making movies like that introduced that concept, and it just grew more and more popular from there. And and so I got to thinking like maybe there's a again I never looked at I don't know why I don't know how or why I could have missed this, but I went looking again to see if there was a mainstream theory out there, um, written by um, some physicist or academic that involves um, that involves the possibility that introduces the possibility that posits the possibility of multiple universes. And sure enough, there was. It's called the many worlds interpretation, and it has to do with quantum physics. Keep in mind, quantum physics and relativity have never been so far, at least publicly, have not been reconciled. They don't connect. They're both kind of contradict each other. But in a way, I'm taking a theory from that's more along the lines of relativity and one that's more in quantum physics. And I'm kind of tying them together. Um, so in the many worlds interpretation, I should actually back up, take one step back, and say um, there's something called the Copenhagen interpretation, which basically says there's again it's that old school thinking. It's as as you arrive, uh, as each moment arrives, going into the future, um, quantum events are measured. Like the spin of a particular atom, a particle, while it's orbiting its nucleus at a specific time. As soon as it's measured, like it sits, everything sits. All quantum particles are exist in a superposition where they exist in all possible locations. Like, imagine like electrons orbiting the nucleus, right? Well, in quantum physics, those electrons are in every possible solution. All this, I'm sorry, they're in all possible positions all at the same time until they're measured. And once they're measured, then wherever they are in that moment, that's where they're going to be. That's what history will say, right? And that outcome, that one outcome, will become reality. The, all other outcomes, where the particle was over here or was over there, um, those possibilities, which they describe as wave functions, um, those will all collapse, and only the one true universe um, um, can exist. So, in other words, out of all possible outcomes or superpositions for each moment, only one can exist. The rest collapse into oblivion. So, but in many worlds interpretation, it's sort of the opposite. You're saying that, um, as as you approach each event, any and all possibilities that could happen do happen, but in separate quantum realities, in separate um, world lines or timelines, whatever you want, however you want to describe it. And unfortunately, all of these different branch universes that are created are undergo something called decoherence, which basically means they can't interact in any way. You're not able to interact with other copies of yourself on other branches. And if if that's true, then that would mean that, well, I mean, it means a couple of things. One, there's a lot of copies of you out there, of all of us. There's many copies of us across, especially the older you get. There's probably, by the time you're like middle aged, there's easily trillions of copies of you out there, because you think about all the possible outcomes that could have happened, and they all do happen, just again in separate universes, separate branch universes. Um, and so, going back to applying this to Susan B. Anthony's situation, so we not only apply it, but we also connect it to what we've already learned, which is block universe theory. So, um, up until the moment she decided to leave, she was she existed. I mean, not literally, but she was, in a way, she was technically existed in a super state where she was both alive and dead until the moment came and it was measured. And she made the decision to go back to Philadelphia, and she continued, that version of her continued to live, while the another one stayed in the hotel and perished. Now, it's not just those aren't the only two that would be created. It'd be a lot more. But just for the sake of this example, I'm just saying those two. Um, so one, yeah, one lived and one perished. And so, and again, even going back to the grandfather paradox theory, you can apply the same thing. In grandfather paradox, it eliminates the paradox by saying, if a time traveler goes back in time and kills his father as a young man before he meets your grandmother, um, he would be successful, and then in that particular reality that he went back to, you your father your father or mother are never born, and therefore you are never born. But when you return to your own branch reality, your grandparents are alive and well, as are your parents, and as you are, and they weren't. Nobody was harmed by your sinister actions. It just, again, all you did was just spawn a new branch universe, nothing more. In fact, just your being there spawned a new branch universe, and then whatever actions you carried out also, again, created new realities along the way. So, so when we combine both block theory and MWI, they propose a view of reality where all possibilities coexist in some sense, undermining the idea of a singular linear progression of time. Um, So, like, here's a couple of points: timelessness and coexistence. In the block universe theory, all events, past, present, future, exist simultaneously in a four-dimensional space-time block. We know that already. Time is a static dimension, and our perception of its flow is an illusion. In the many worlds interpretation, our every quantum event spawns multiple parallel universes, each corresponding to a possible outcome. All possible histories and futures exist simultaneously across these branching universes. And then both suggest a reality where all moments or outcomes are equally real, whether as points in space-time block or as branches in multi-universes. And then there's determinism and completeness. Black universe theory implies a deterministic reality where all events are fixed within the four-dimensional structure. Many worlds interpretation is also deterministic at the level of the universal wave function, as all possible outcomes of quantum events occur across different branches. The apparent randomness in quantum mechanics is an artifact of our perspective within one branch. Both frameworks suggest a complete, unchanging reality containing all possibilities, with our subjective experience selecting a subset or slice of the block or a specific branch. And finally, rejection of a privilege now. The block universe theory denies a universal present, as all moments are equally real. MWI similarly lacks a privileged reality, as all quantum outcomes coexist across parallel universes. There's no single true outcome, just as there's no single true moment in the black universe. So you can see it already, how the two theories connected very well, and how more and more we're beginning to see how Susan B. Anthony's premonition, um, why it was able why it was able to occur, why it was able to actually happen. We haven't gotten to the how yet, but we're starting with, I'm sorry, the why. Why would she be able to see something and change it? Well, it could be because when you combine these two theories, you get an explanation. You get a very convincing explanation that pretty much covers um, at least that part of it. So let me read here a little bit more about the connection between the two theories and how they conceptualize a multiplicity of events or states as a part of a single unified reality. So space-time is a multiverse container. One way to connect the two is to imagine the block universe as a framework that contains all the branching universes of MWI. Each branch in MWI could be represented as a distinct slice or trajectory to the four-dimensional block, each with each trajectory corresponding to a unique sequence of quantum outcomes. For example, a quantum event, like a particle spin measurement, could split the universe into two multiple branches, each with its own timeline. These timelines could coexist within the block universe, where the entire structure encompasses all possible quantum histories. Wave function and space-time. In multi-world interpretation, the universal wave function describes all possible states of the universe. Some physicists speculate that this wave function could be mapped into a block-like structure, where each branch corresponds to a specific configuration of space-time events. The Wheeler-DeWitt equation in quantum cosmology, which describes a timeless wave function of the universe, could bridge the two ideas. This equation suggests a static quantum state aligning with the block universe's timelessness with MWI's branching could describe how different quantum outcomes manifest within that state. Relativity and quantum branching. Special relativity, which underpins the block universe, shows that simultaneity is relative, meaning different observers experience different nows. Many worlds interpretation branching could be seen as a quantum analog where different branches represent different realities that coexist, with no single branch being privileged. Some theoretical work explores quantum quantum entanglement across branches could relate to relativistic effects, potentially unifying the block universe's space-time structure with MWI's multiverse. In other words, there's a possibility you could be quantumly entangled with one or more other copies of yourself in other branch universes. This quantum entanglement connection could go a long way to explaining a lot of the so-called psychic phenomena that have been documented throughout history. it could possibly be the reason for, or at least part of the reason of how Anthony was able to receive the glimpse of the near future that ended up saving her life. Unfortunately, there's no current way to test whether MWI is real or not. So, all that being said, um, when you bring Black universe theory and many worlds interpretation together, you create a framework that where Susan B. Anthony's premonition could absolutely be possible. It could be that she saw she caught a glimpse of a future event that we know that Black universe tells us is already happening, and she was able to change it because of the many worlds interpretation. Because all all events that can happen do happen, or so any of whatever you choose, whatever your choice is from moment to moment, that's the branch you're on, and then other branches form from that that you can't see or interact with, allegedly interact with. So you're oblivious to the fact that your every decision is spawning different branches, and they all exist within this massive four-dimensional manifold of space-time, or yeah, space-time. And to add to that, now to the how she was able to do it, they mentioned quantum entanglement. And so again, for those who don't know what quantum entanglement is, the it's basically a theory that you have two particles that are at any given distance. It could be light years, it could be trillions of miles, it could be 1 mile. It doesn't it makes no difference that no matter how far apart they are, they could be on one side of the galaxy and the one another one can be on the other side. That when you affect one of them, it instantly in real time affects the other one in real time with virtually no delay. Which Einstein used to call the spooky effect. You know, it's entanglement at a distance. It's you're there's again that it's applying that to this. It could be a way to explain why she had or how she had the premonition, which is um, she well, I'm sorry, why she had it. It could be that if there are indeed many copies of us in all these different branch universes, and they're all making different choices and experiencing different versions of the future, and since none of them have since they're not all happening at the same time, because again there's no privilege now, there's no privilege branch, they're all equal, they're all equally real, um, and they've the events have already happened. um, it's possible that as copies of yourself continue to be created within this block, there's the possibility that there's a quantum entanglement or something similar, or a similar effect between all of the different copies of yourself. All the from when you were young to when you're older, the millions or billions or trillions of copies of you in all these different branch universes. You're all connected through, again, either quantum entanglement or something very similar. Now, if that were true, obviously most people aren't aware of it. If that is true, then most people just don't even know that's what's happening. But it could potentially explain a lot of everyday stuff we experience, like intuition, gut feelings, instincts. It could be that these other these other branched versions of yourself um, are experiencing, again, similar futures, but they're experiencing them before you, and you're getting the benefit of their experience without even knowing it. So, like I know there have been many times when I've been in a situation where I suddenly, I was going to do something, and I felt really, my stomach just turned for no reason. It just suddenly felt turned. I felt really sick and it's got sweaty. I'm like, I started second guessing myself, like, should I really do this? Should I really go through with this? I don't know. Um, it was almost like something in my guts was telling me, no, 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 don't make this. This is a big mistake. Don't do it. You're gonna regret it. And you wonder, like, what's doing that? Like, where does that come from? People, you hear about this all the time. People just say I have a really, really horrible feeling, and then I end up changing my mind, and it saved my life, or it saved my child's life, or it saved my career, or whatever. Um, or I ended up winning the lottery. It's just, it's these, it's this, it's like information that seems to come from nowhere that is it's trying to warn you or tell you something important. And that's the thing. It's usually almost always related to something important, like, again, like danger, like dangerous situations, life or death situations, or if someone's sick and they don't know that they're sick, um, and the people around them are, or one of their friends or their family members, they'll have like this gut feeling that they know what's wrong with them, but they can't prove it. Like, I know this person has a tumor in their brain, but I can't prove it, and so no one's going to believe me if I tell them. But I know I'm right. Again, that comes from somewhere. People, it happens all the time, and it comes from somewhere. You can't just write it off as just like a lucky guess. Nothing lucky about it. It was a very, these are very specific situations, and they end up being right. Their instincts guide them, the right way. So it's possible that copies of you have experienced a very similar reality, but they experienced it before you. They're ahead of you in the block, and so you're already benefiting from that information. You just don't know it. That information, those experiences, it's all being transmitted to you, but you don't know it is. It's just somehow, it's like, I don't know if, like, you're downloading it or you're just sharing that consciousness or those feelings, with, I don't know. I don't, that I can't explain, but somehow it could be possible that all of those unexplainable, um, all those unexplainable um, phenomena, again, from premonitions to instinct to intuition, it could be that you're um, being warned somehow by some kind of quantum connection to other copies of you in other branch universes, and it's just, nature. It's just somehow, they're more ahead of you, and you're just reaping the benefit of their experience. Maybe they did it wrong, and now, so that information gets transmitted to you, and now but you know that you don't know that even though you do. And so your gut feelings, or your your organs, your stomach, or your whatever, your starts to starts to tighten up because something's wrong. You instinctively, something's wrong, or you're about to do something wrong, or something bad's about to happen, but you don't know quite what it is, but you just know something really bad is about to happen. And so that's where that's could, again, when we open up the possibility of these kinds of theories, unlike conventional wisdom, which would just which all it can't explain any of it, it would just attempt to debunk it. um, it actually offers a possibility, a relatively, a sane possibility, cogent possibility that's backed by um, logic. Obviously there's no facts because no one it's very difficult to prove the existence of multi-world interpretation, or the existence of parallel worlds, but at least right now. But um, um, it offers at least something other than just, oh, it was nothing. Don't worry about it. So if we take a moment to review the two questions from the very beginning, which is, how and why she was able to um, have that premonition. Well, uh, she might have had it because the block universe says all events that happen from the very beginning to the very end, if such things even exist, have already happened. They're all equally real, and they're all happening at the same time. which means the future happens at the same time, which means that's how that could explain why she was able to see a small glimpse of her future, of or at least a future. Um, and then how she was able to do it, like the mechanism. Again, it could be external. It could be something, some kind of outside influence by some some other life form, or some kind of, I don't know, or you know, just picking that specific moment to warn her about. Um, I don't know, but I do know that it's possible though that her other her other copies, which could be quantumly entangled with all of them, one of them may have shared that experience. One of them that had that experience, and things went bad. Because remembering in MWI, one of the outcomes is she burns in the hotel. So at least one version of her dies in that hotel, and maybe that version shared that experience with her um, right before she died, and that's why, and since it was such a strong, impactful moment, it's not like it's not like like accidentally stepping on a tack or something like that. That's not exactly life or death. It's like this was a life or death thing, and the burning alive, dying is a very powerful vision. And so while she was dying, while that version of her was dying in the hotel room, maybe the emotion and the experience was so powerful, it strengthened that connection right until she died. It strengthened that connection, and then allowed her to not just feel a gut, just like a gut feeling. It allowed her to see and hear the whole experience, and again allow her to retain that memory and act on it and change it. And she's able. The reason she was able to change it is because, again, the many worlds interpretation says that um, all events that can happen do happen, and so in which could explain why she was allowed and able to change um, the future event that she foresaw, instead of being doomed to live it no matter what. And the second question, which was, after getting knowledge from the future, she used it to avoid her and her niece's untimely demise. But then, if she was able to avoid it, how was she able to see it in the first place? Well, again, that's that's where, again, I think that the MWI comes into play, where she she saw she witnessed it, and then was able to change it, because the MWI theory allows that. Allows it. It means that, unfortunately, a version of her stayed and perished. Possibly many of them stayed and perished, but some of them, because like the one from our branch universe, thankfully survived. And it makes you wonder, like, how many others out there survived, or how many others encountered that situation, and wonder how many of them perished. But we'll never know. But anyway, we really covered. I think we did a pretty good job of covering the two main questions I had. Again, um, I'm not saying any of this is 100% true. I'm just saying um, that I think we fully explored some new possibilities that could adequately and potentially explain how this whole situation was possible, how she was able to have that experience and then use it to her advantage, and how, and others, not just her, how other people were. Some of them, unfortunately, didn't use it to their advantage, but some did. And I think, again, between block universe theory, quantum entanglement, and many worlds interpretation, I think between those three things, and unfortunately, a lot of it we can't prove. They're very, very difficult things to prove. It makes you wonder about all the other Anthony's. Like, did they all receive this information equally, or did only some of them get it and some not? That makes you wonder how that works. But yeah. Oh, and it also raises the question about the human soul. And so most people believe in the idea of a spirit. They believe that, the soul and the spirit are real, tangible things, and they do exist. I I wonder if somehow we could prove that these um, ideas were true, and that's how the universe actually worked. It makes you wonder, where does the soul fit into all this? You know, where does it- where does the does each copy have its own soul, unique soul, or is your soul like being divided up amongst all the copies? And then eventually, when all of you are dead, they all they all like rejoin and reconnect somewhere else. I don't know. I have no idea, but it does raise the question about how, if the soul exists, what does that say about all the different copies of yourself? Again, do they all have souls? I mean, I would imagine they do, but how would that work with how does that fit into this model, right? Like, where do those souls go? Do they do they live in the fourth dimension? Is there another dimension, a fifth or sixth or seventh dimension that they exist in? Who, who knows? But I have struggled with that one, and I can't come up with anything. I haven't come up with anything yet. I will. I think I will at some point, but that's the one part of this that um, can't even come up with a reasonably or worthy explanation as what happens with the soul and all this, you know, splitting up of, or all these many, many, many copies of yourself existing all at the same time on different world lines. It's like, okay, so again, do we all share the same soul, or do we all have our own souls? So I don't know. That's more philosophical question, and philosophy was never my strong point. So I think I'll close this discussion with just leaving it open to you to express any thoughts or opinions you might have. If you if you have your own idea about what Susan B. Anthony experienced, let me know in the chat. How do you think she was? How do you think she was able to have a dream about something that ended up occurring? Was it just, again? Do you think it was just coincidence, or do you think it was luck, or woman's intuition, or maybe something much more extraordinary, like MWI and quantum entanglement? Again, please feel free to share your thoughts. I'd be happy to hear them. And before I end this episode, I wanted to take a moment to address something. Just, just, I'm sure most of you weren't thinking this, but just in case, some of you might have been wondering, like, what about fortune tellers, or palm readers, or tarot card readers, or tea leaf readers, or even like horoscopes? It's a great question. I won't be covering these in this episode, obviously, and the main reason why, unfortunately, is because I think, in my opinion, many of them are frauds. They just do what basically some of them do well, and some of them not so well. Basically, do what gamblers have been, like professional gamblers have been doing all their lives, which is just playing the odds. Now, just to be clear, I am definitely a believer in psychic abilities. I do believe there are some out there who are the real deal, so to speak. They do have like a real gift, but I don't think they're that common. I don't think every person who claims to be a psychic is psychic. It has that gift. I don't, because I always, whenever there's okay, one of my rules of thumb is, whenever there's money involved, my first question is, okay, is this real? Do you actually have a gift, or are you just trying to make a car payment or a mortgage payment? You know, whenever there's money involved, it's always the first question that comes to my mind. So, and I think that's a fair point to make. I have personally encountered a couple of well, I don't know if I call them professional, but prognosticators. I had a palm reading once a long time ago. I had a tarot card reading once. I had a guy who just stared at me and just kind of tried to read me from just by staring at me and getting impression from me. He was wrong. He was dead. Every prediction, everything that anything everyone ever said about me, that was, or said to me, that was regarding a card reading, or again, just some kind of psychic reading, was either so vague, yeah, it was like very vague, or it was just flat out wrong. They just completely wrong. It, I think there's this episode of X Files called Jose Chung's. Oh, no, no, I'm sorry. It's called I think it's Lloyd Bruckman's Final Repose. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, he there's a scene in the beginning of X Files episode where Fox Mulder gives his take on professional prognosticators, and I'm gonna go ahead and play that video because I think it adequately explains. I feel the same way with him. What he says in that video, I feel the same. So I'll go ahead and close this out by saying thank you for your time and attention. I very much appreciate it, and I'll hope to see you in the next episode. Good night.
Sorry, you're gonna have to stand back, all right? It's not an official police business. Back up.
Mr. Yappy, I appreciate you coming all the way down here.
Quiet. Yes, seeing visions. Visions of the killer. He does not feel like he's in control of his own life. Very important. That's why he kills. Yes.
Can you see what he looks like?
Looks like a white man with facial hair. Or not. But he has, yes, a tattoo. Somewhere on his body. Maybe the tattoo has the facial hair. I think. I see him here, forcing himself, yes, on a girl. But he cannot perform. So he's taking out his rage. It's gone. I lost the vision. Someone is blocking me. I am picking up negative energy. Please, leave this room.
I'm part of this investigation.
You give off negative energy.
I can assure you, Mr. Yappy, I'm a believer in psychic ability.
So you say with your mouth. But your thoughts tell me the truth.
Agent Mulder, please.
I can't take you anywhere.
Now, excuse me, I have an interview to give. Skeptics like you make me sick.
Mr. Yappy, read this thought.
Social man.
It's too bad about your negative energy, Mulder. You missed quite a performance.
Look what he did to my pen.
Well, let me impress you with my psychic ability. Mr. Yappy proclaimed the victim's body would be found near water. He saw a church or a school in the vicinity. He got a flash of the letter S and/or the number 7.
So what's your point?
Well, his leads are so vague as to be practically useless, yet easily interpreted as correct after the fact.
He said that the killer doesn't feel in control of his own life. But that's true of everyone at times.
You said a lot of other things.
Yeah, and some are bound by percentages to be right, but most will turn out wrong. Now, which is which?
Look, all I know is that so far, Yappy has provided more solid, concrete leads on this case than you have. Now, if you don't mind, I have to get an APB out on a white male, 17 to 34, with or without a beard, maybe a tattoo, who's impotent. Let's go.
Might as well go home, Mulder. This case is as good as solved.